The first alarm didn't sound like war. It was a strange hum that rolled across the colony's metal ground, almost polite, like the universe giving a warning before the punch. The human settlement on Delta 9 had grown used to small disturbances. Storms, dust, trade ships. But not this. Sergeant Lynn Carter stood outside the command shelter when the hum deepened into a roar. She turned toward the horizon, where the silver glow of alien craft cracked through the cloud line. For a moment, she thought it was another supply drop. Then the sky split open. The first strike hit a communications tower, scattering bright shards like broken stars. The second hit a field full of crops that had taken years to grow in this harsh soil. By the time the third came, the human defenses had already activated. Somewhere behind the base, a small boy named Theo watched from his window. His parents worked in engineering. They had told him not to leave the house, but Theo didn't listen. He was clutching a small creature in his arms, a short, round, angry-looking animal with black and white fur and tiny, fearless eyes. The honey badger, called Runt, had been with Theo since he was 5. No one really understood why the colony allowed him to keep it, but no one dared argue. Outside, the world began to shake. Alien troops, tall, insect-like creatures from the Kithar Dominion, landed on the surface, moving fast and precise. Their translators screamed through radio static, "Surrender your command posts!" Humans will comply. Humans didn't comply. Carter barked orders, activating drone turrets and defensive grids. The first battle of Delta 9 began. Plasma fire lit up the night, green against the dust-filled air. Every explosion sounded like thunder trapped in metal. Theo's parents were still at the power hub when an explosion took out the main conduit. The lights went dead. Theo hid under the table with Runt, who growled low in his chest. The sound was too steady, too confident for something so small. Theo whispered, "It's okay, boy. They won't find us. They found him." The aliens breached the outer wall with ease. They moved through the ruins, scanning for survivors. One of them opened the door to the engineer's home and saw the boy. The Kithar soldier tilted its head, confused by the small human clutching an animal. It stepped forward, its clawed hand reaching out. The honey badger jumped. There was no warning, no hesitation, only pure violence wrapped in fur. Runt's teeth clamped down on alien armor, tearing through the soft joint beneath. The Kithar screamed, stumbling back as plasma spilled across the floor. Runt didn't stop. Theo froze in horror and awe while the creature ripped at the invader's throat with terrifying precision. When it was over, the alien wasn't moving. Theo whispered, "Good boy," but his hands were shaking. Outside, Sergeant Carter's squad was pinned down. She called for evac, but comms were jammed. Smoke covered the base. The enemy kept coming, wave after wave, confident that humans would break. Then a transmission broke through, distorted but clear enough. "This is Engineer Base 2. They have a child down here." "We need help!" Carter cursed under her breath and signaled a squad. "We're moving!" The Kithar command watched from orbit, analyzing human resistance. Their general was calm. "The species reacts with emotion. Predictable. They will surrender once their young are captured." He was wrong. By the time Carter's squad reached the engineer sector, they found something the aliens didn't expect: fear. Not human fear, but alien. Several Kithar soldiers lay torn apart, their armor shredded. The walls were clawed, the floor smeared with strange patterns of acid and fur. Theo was crouched beside the honey badger, both covered in dust and ash. The child looked at Carter with wide eyes. "They tried to take him." Carter knelt beside him, staring at the destroyed Kithar. "Kid, what the hell did you feed that thing?" Theo shook his head.
Nothing.
"He's just mad!" The comms crackled again, filled with overlapping screams and orders. The alien general had noticed the sudden drop in one of his ground units. "Locate the anomaly," he ordered. "Neutralize the human pet." It was the wrong command. By dawn, the humans had pushed back 2 full waves. The Kithar didn't understand why their ground forces kept retreating, whispering about a beast they couldn't kill. The soldiers spoke of small shadows ripping through armor, of glowing eyes in the dark. In the center of the chaos, Theo sat beside Runt, petting his fur with trembling hands. "We'll be okay," he said softly. "Right?" The honey badger lifted his head, teeth still stained from battle, and made a low rumbling sound that didn't sound friendly to anyone who wasn't human. Somewhere above, the alien fleet began to reconsider what kind of war they had started. The night after the first assault, the colony looked like a graveyard of machines. Smoke rose in long silver threads into the pale sky of Delta 9. Most of the colony's power was gone. Communication towers were silent. Only the emergency beacons still blinked, slow, lonely dots of red in the dark. Sergeant Carter stood on the wreckage of a downed transport, staring at the distant glow of alien ships in orbit. She had fought in 3 different colonies, but this one felt different. The Kithar weren't just here to conquer. They were studying humans, testing them like lab rats. She could feel it. Behind her, Theo sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, holding Runt close. The honey badger's fur was dirty, its claws still stained from the fight. The boy hadn't slept not even for a minute. Every sound made him flinch. Every shadow made Runt growl. Carter sighed and crouched beside him. "You did good, kid. You and that little monster saved more people than you know." Theo looked at her, his eyes red. "They said they'll come back, right?" "They always do," she said. "But next time we'll be ready." The soldiers nearby were building barricades from scrap metal and broken parts. Humans were always better when desperate. It was their curse and their gift. The engineers worked without rest, repairing drones and salvaging weapons from alien wrecks. A few joked to keep spirits alive, but their eyes were hollow. Above them, the Kithar command was furious. Reports of a small Earth creature killing entire squads had reached the orbiting mothership. General Vrith slammed a clawed hand on the table. "A child's pet? You mean to tell me trained Kithar soldiers were destroyed by an animal?" The officer hesitated. "It's not an animal, sir. It's something else. It does not fear pain. It does not retreat. We shot it and it kept coming." Vrith narrowed his eyes. "Then we capture it. I want to see this Earth creature myself." Back on the ground, Carter received word of another landing. The Kithar were coming again, but this time not to destroy. They were hunting something specific. She didn't like that kind of precision. It meant they had learned. By evening, the colony scanners picked up new heat signatures, dozens of ships landing farther south. Carter gathered her squad. "They're coming from the canyon side. We'll hit them before they reach the settlement." Theo overheard it. "You're leaving?" Carter nodded. "We'll keep them away from you." "Stay here with the medics," Runt growled again, pacing like he understood. The boy held him tight. "He doesn't like being left behind." Carter forced a small smile. "Tell him he can guard you." "That's a big job." But as the humans moved out, the honey badger kept staring toward the canyon, his small black eyes locked on the direction of the threat. That night, the battle began again. Plasma fire lit up the cliffs. Carter's squad ambushed the first wave, catching the Kithar by surprise. It worked at first. But soon, more of them arrived, crawling through the rocks like living metal. Carter ordered retreat toward the base, but the enemy pushed harder, surrounding them. Then the screaming started. Not human, but alien. The first explosion came from behind the Kithar lines. One soldier fell, then another. Something moved fast through the smoke, too small to target. Their scanners showed nothing, but their formation began to crumble. One soldier fired blindly into the fog, hitting his own ally. The chaos spread like wildfire. Carter blinked through her visor feed. "What the hell is happening down there?" A corporal's voice came through static. "Something's tearing through them, ma'am." I think it's the kid's pet." Through the smoke, she saw a flash of white and black fur darting under a Kithar mech, ripping through its exposed joints. The machine toppled, crashing into 2 more. Plasma bolts flew everywhere, but Runt was already gone, moving with impossible speed. Then she saw Theo. The boy had followed them, stupid, brave, and crying, but somehow alive. He carried a small beacon transmitter and shouted through the comm link, "He came to help you!" Carter couldn't decide whether to yell or thank him. "Theo, stay back!" But the honey badger wasn't staying back. He had found his purpose now. Every alien that came close was met with claws and teeth. It wasn't just rage, it was something smarter, something that looked almost tactical. He attacked weak points, hit the unarmored gaps, and vanished before anyone could react. By the time the smoke cleared, half the Kethar squad was gone. The rest ran, stumbling through their own wreckage. Theo knelt beside Runt, who was breathing hard but unhurt. He whispered, "You came for me again." Carter looked at the pair, shaking her head. The universe really doesn't know what it's messing with. High above, on the alien command ship, General Vrith watched the battle feed in silence. His eyes narrowed as he zoomed in on the image of the small Earth creature. "A species that breeds monsters as pets," he said quietly. "Maybe the stories about humans were true." The comm officer hesitated. "Should we continue the ground assault?" Vrith looked at the image again, the boy hugging his pet in the burning ruins. "No, bring me everything we have on Earth wildlife." By now, the galaxy had begun to notice. Word spread between fleets and colonies that something strange had happened on Delta 9, something small, violent, and unstoppable. And the universe, once so confident in its power, started to feel a little afraid. By the third sunrise after the first invasion, Delta 9 didn't look like a colony anymore. The human settlement had become a fortress of smoke and scrap metal. Every wall was patched with armor plates from fallen ships. Every survivor had that look, the hollow stare of someone who had seen too much and still refused to quit. Sergeant Carter stood in what used to be the mess hall, now turned into a command room. She was staring at a live feed of orbit traffic, Kithar destroyers forming new positions above the planet. They were regrouping for something big. The engineers whispered that the aliens were preparing a planet-wide sweep. If they couldn't capture the humans, they'd wipe the colony clean. Carter's jaw tightened. "Then we hit them first." Theo sat in a corner, polishing the dirt off Runt's fur. The honey badger seemed calmer now, though every loud sound made him growl like a storm in a box. The boy had changed too. His face older somehow, like he'd aged years in days. One of the soldiers came in. "Commander wants you in the hangar, ma'am. We're loading the shuttle." Carter looked at Theo. "You two stay here, and keep that little demon out of the supply crates this time." Theo smiled faintly. "He's not a demon." "Right," Carter said. "He's worse." Outside, the hangar was chaos. Mechanics shouted over alarms, carrying fuel canisters and plasma packs. The plan was insane, even by human standards. Use an old atmospheric shuttle, slip through the alien blockade, and send a signal to nearby colonies for help. But the Kithar weren't blind. Within minutes of launch, their scanners picked it up. Plasma shots streaked across the sky like angry stars. The shuttle rocked hard. Inside, Carter cursed as controls flickered. "We're hit!" The ship spun, breaking atmosphere and diving toward the wastelands. The crash shook the ground miles away. Smoke rose like a new mountain. Back at base, Theo watched the sky through cracked glass. "She's gone," he whispered. Runt let out a low, furious growl. He turned toward the horizon as if ready to run there on foot. Theo swallowed hard. "You want to find her?" The honey badger didn't answer. He just started walking. Theo grabbed his pack, tightened his boots, and followed. They traveled for hours through broken terrain, guided by smoke and instinct. The ground was littered with alien wreckage, bits of armor and metal shards that still glowed from heat. Theo's clothes tore on jagged steel, but he kept moving. Runt led the way, sniffing the air, his body tense. When they finally found the crash site, the shuttle was half buried in dirt. Carter was alive, pinned under a broken console. She looked up as Theo appeared beside her. "You again," she rasped. "I told you to stay put." Theo smiled weakly. "You didn't say anything about rescuing you. With Runt's help, don't ask how. Claws make fine tools. They pulled Carter free. Her leg was bleeding badly." She winced but refused to stop. "We need to move. The Kithar will send scavengers to check the wreck. They didn't have to wait long. The first alien patrol arrived before sundown, 4 armored soldiers with scanners. Runt crouched low, muscles twitching. Theo whispered, "Don't." But Carter looked at him, then at the enemy, and said, "Actually, do!" Runt exploded out of the shadows, a streak of white fury. The first alien didn't even scream before he went down. Plasma bolts tore the ground apart, but the badger kept moving. Carter aimed her rifle, covering the gaps, while Theo dragged extra ammo from the wreck. It was over in minutes. Silence followed, broken, dusty, and full of the smell of burned metal. Carter leaned on a rock, breathing hard. "That thing isn't a pet. He's a one-creature army," Theo frowned. "He's just protecting us." She looked at the boy, then at the creature licking blood off his claws. "Kid, maybe the universe doesn't need protecting from us. Maybe it needs protecting from us." By nightfall, they lit a small fire beside the wreck. The stars overhead shimmered like holes punched in black glass. Theo sat beside Runt, feeding him bits of ration bars. Carter spoke quietly. "Command will send reinforcements soon. When they see the reports, they'll realize this wasn't a small raid. The Cathar are testing us for something bigger." Theo looked at her. "Do you think they're afraid of us now?" Carter didn't answer right away. Her eyes drifted toward the alien corpses scattered in the dark. "Afraid? No," she said softly. "Not yet. But they should be." Above the planet, General Vrith stood before a massive holographic map, his claws tracing the growing red zones, areas where his troops had been wiped out. "By humans?" one officer asked. Vrith's eyes narrowed. "By one human child and a creature from Earth. The universe keeps telling me humans are weak. I think the universe is lying." 3 days after the crash, every major channel across the human colonies was repeating the same report. Delta 9 under siege. One squad survives. One child and an unknown Earth creature involved. The words traveled faster than ships. Within a week, human fleets were whispering stories about a soldier and a boy who turned an entire alien division into debris. Most thought it was propaganda. Others called it impossible. But on Delta 9, it was still happening. Carter had managed to re-establish communication with a nearby orbital station using the shuttle's damaged transmitter. Reinforcements were on their way, but the Kithar weren't waiting. Their fleet began atmospheric bombardment. Precise, slow, surgical destruction. Each blast shook the ground like a heartbeat. The colony's shields couldn't take much more. Theo stood in the rubble beside Runt, looking up at the sky. His voice was small, almost lost in the noise. "They won't stop, will they?" Carter adjusted her rifle. "No, but neither will we." The humans had regrouped around the old mining tunnels, converting them into bunkers and ambush points. It was rough, dark work, dust in their lungs, sweat in their eyes, but it was home now. Every survivor carried a weapon. Even the medics had plasma pistols taped to their belts. But it wasn't enough. The scanners showed incoming Kithar ground troops. Hundreds this time, not dozens. Carter ordered everyone underground. "We hold until backup arrives. No one dies for nothing." Theo crouched in the tunnel corner, Runt pressed close beside him. The honey badger's fur bristled, his eyes glowing faintly from reflected light. He made a low rumble that vibrated against the walls. It wasn't fear. It was the kind of sound animals make before they kill. Carter tried to joke. "Does it ever stop growling?" Theo shook his head. "Only when I'm asleep." The Kithar began their descent into the tunnels, unaware of what waited below. The humans had wired the ceilings with explosives, using mining charges and old drones as traps. When the first group entered, the floor shuddered. Then came the fire. The blast ripped through the tunnel network, turning darkness into red heat. The first alien squad vanished in seconds. The second stumbled into the ruins, confused, firing wildly. Carter's team struck from behind, quick, clean, precise, but it wasn't enough. For every alien that fell, 3 more came. The air turned heavy with dust and burning metal. Theo hid behind a broken support beam. "We can't hold forever!" Carter's voice came through her helmet, calm and hard. "We don't need forever. Just long enough for command to notice we're still alive." But something else noticed first. The Kithar general, watching from orbit, had seen enough. He turned to his aides. "Send the elite hunters. The humans want to hide like rats. Let's send them predators." The hunters dropped in silence, sleek, fast, built for killing. They entered the tunnels through thermal vents, cutting off the humans from every side. One of them found Theo's section first. The creature's armor shimmered like glass, its claws dripping with energy. It scanned the boy, confused for a moment by the small size of its target. Then it raised its weapon. The honey badger moved. It hit the hunter before it could fire, claws flashing, teeth sinking into armor. Sparks lit the tunnel like lightning. The alien screamed in a voice too high to sound natural. It tried to throw the creature off, but Runt didn't care about armor or physics or fear. When Carter arrived seconds later, the fight was already done. The tunnel floor was a wreck of alien metal and shredded skin. Runt stood on top, chest heaving, eyes glowing with reflected light. Theo's voice was shaking. "He saved me again." Carter stared at the creature. "He's not just saving you, kid. He's saving all of us." She turned to the comm officer. "Send the footage. Right now. The whole system needs to see this." Within hours, that short, raw video, grainy, full of smoke and fire, spread across the fleet networks. A single honey badger ripping through alien armor, a boy's terrified voice in the background, a human sergeant calling for reinforcements. It went viral across the stars. Soldiers on distant outposts cheered. Alien diplomats panicked. And somewhere deep in the Kithar Empire, a quiet sense of dread began to spread. General Vrith watched the footage, his expression unreadable. "So," he murmured, "they send children and beasts to war." His second-in-command shifted nervously. "Should we escalate?" Vrith's gaze hardened. "No, not yet. We'll capture them alive. I want to understand what makes Earth so dangerous." Down on the planet, the tunnels had gone silent again. Smoke curled through the darkness. Carter wiped sweat from her face and looked at Theo and Runt. "Get some rest," she said softly. "Tomorrow's going to be worse," Theo nodded, resting his head on Runt's shoulder. The creature growled once more, low and steady, like thunder waiting for a reason. Above them, alien ships moved into new formation. The Kithar weren't retreating. They were planning something smarter, and the universe, still watching, had no idea what kind of storm it had just unleashed. The storms of Delta 9 came early that night. Wind howled across the ruins, bending the smoke like ghosts. The tunnels trembled under every distant explosion. Sergeant Carter was awake long before dawn. Her leg was still bleeding under the bandage, but she ignored it. On the holoscreen, she watched new coordinates flashing, alien signals moving in from the west. It wasn't a small force this time. The Kithar had sent war machines the size of buildings. "We can't hold this line," said one of her officers. Carter stared at the map. "We're not holding it. We're going to break it." They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of food. But humans had a habit of turning last stands into history lessons. Theo sat nearby, whispering softly as Runt slept beside him. The honey badger looked peaceful, almost innocent, curled in the boy's lap. If someone had walked in right then, they would never have guessed that creature had ripped through alien armor days ago. Carter knelt beside Theo. "You still have that beacon transmitter you brought from the crash?" Theo nodded. "Yes," she smiled faintly. "Good. You're going to help me trick a few aliens." By midday, the sky burned again. Alien dropships cut through the clouds like glowing knives. Carter's team scattered into position, planting decoy beacons across the canyon. Every one of them pulsed with the same human signal frequency, designed to confuse scanners and draw the Kithar away from the tunnels. The plan worked. The first wave landed far from the real base. The aliens found nothing but empty rocks and recorded human voices shouting orders. Then came the second trick, Runt. Carter had rigged a stolen drone to project thermal signatures of the honey badger. The aliens had started hunting for it specifically, desperate to capture it alive. Now every false reading made them panic. For a while, the humans laughed as the mighty Kithar chased phantom heat trails through the dust. But the laughter stopped when one of the real ships landed right in front of the base. Carter swore under her breath. "They found us anyway. This landing wasn't like the others." The ship was black, sleek, silent. From its ramp came soldiers in armor unlike the rest, deep blue with glowing red veins. The elite hunters had returned, and this time they brought someone new. At the center of their formation stood a tall figure wrapped in shimmering armor. His eyes glowed faintly through the mask. General Vrith himself. The air went still as his voice echoed through a translator drone. "Humans of Delta 9, you have resisted well, but the creature you protect belongs to us now. Hand it over, and your species will live." Theo stepped forward before Carter could stop him. His voice shook, but it carried. "He's not yours." "He's my friend." The general tilted his head. You call it a friend? It kills, it destroys. It has no loyalty. Theo's jaw tightened. Then you don't understand loyalty? Vrith's armor pulsed brighter. You misunderstand, child. I understand it too well. I've seen what loyalty makes your kind do. He raised a hand, and the air filled with light. Dozens of drones activated, their weapons humming. Carter shouted, "Take cover!" The battle that followed was short and savage. Plasma bolts lit the sky, cutting through rock and steel. Human turrets fired until they melted. Runt moved faster than sight, darting between blasts, tearing through drone joints. Theo stayed behind cover, watching in terrified awe as his companion turned into a blur of violence. Carter fought until her rifle jammed, then switched to a sidearm. "Keep firing!" But the Kithar pressed harder. Vrith's hunters advanced through the fire, immune to most weapons. The humans fell back, step by step, until they reached the heart of the tunnels. Then Runt did something none of them expected. He turned and ran straight toward the enemy ship. "Theo, call him back!" Carter shouted, Theo's throat locked. "He's not listening!" The honey badger leapt into the open, dodging plasma blasts, smoke curling behind him. He hit the ship ramp and disappeared inside. Seconds later, the entire vessel began to shake. The sound that followed wasn't mechanical, it was primal. The kind that made even soldiers pause mid-battle. Screams filled the comms. One by one, the hunter drones went silent. Then the ship exploded. The shockwave threw dust and fire across the canyon. Carter and Theo were knocked to the ground. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then a small, singed figure stumbled out of the smoke, fur blackened, eyes still burning with defiance. Theo ran to him, falling to his knees. "Runt!" The honey badger limped forward, blood streaking his side, but alive. The humans erupted in cheers that shook the tunnels. Even Carter felt something sharp twist in her chest, a mix of pride and dread, because she knew what that explosion meant. The Kithar wouldn't retreat after this. They would send everything. Vrith had survived the blast. His armor was cracked, his eyes wide with fury. He stared at the boy holding the small creature and whispered, "So this is what terrifies the galaxy." One child and one beast, he raised his comm device. "Prepare the orbital cannon." The sky of Delta 9 went white. It wasn't dawn. It was the light from the Kithar's orbital cannon charging above the atmosphere, a line of fire stretching from orbit straight down at the planet. Every human soldier who saw it went silent. Even the wind stopped, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Sergeant Carter's voice broke through the comms. "Everyone underground! Move now!" They didn't make it in time. The first strike hit the far ridge, turning stone to glass. The shockwave ripped through the valley, flattening half the base. Theo clung to Runt, his body pressed into the dirt as the ground rolled like an ocean. When the dust settled, half the human survivors were gone. The tunnels collapsed. Fires burned in long lines across the landscape. Theo coughed through the ash, eyes wide. "They're going to kill everyone." Carter pulled herself from the rubble, her voice rough. "Not if we kill that cannon first." The remaining soldiers gathered, barely 20 of them. They were dirty, bleeding, exhausted, and ready to die. But no one spoke of surrender. Carter pointed toward the horizon where the faint beam of the orbital cannon pulsed through the clouds. "They think we'll hide. Let's prove them wrong." The humans began their last march. They moved through craters and smoke, guided by Runt, who limped but refused to stop. The honey badger's fur was matted with blood, but his eyes burned with the same stubborn fire that kept humans alive long after logic said they shouldn't be. Theo walked beside him, carrying a pulse rifle too heavy for his arms. "We're almost there, boy." Hours later, they reached the uplink tower, the last working structure capable of transmitting a coded signal to orbit. Carter collapsed beside the console and opened a channel. "Command, this is Delta 9. We have visual on Kithar orbital weapon." "Preparing counterstrike," Static answered her. "No reinforcements." No response. Just silence. She turned to the others. "We're doing this alone." Theo stepped forward. "Tell me what to do." Carter looked at him for a long moment, then smiled grimly. "You and your friend buy us time." While the soldiers armed the uplink with improvised missiles, the Kithar found them again. Dropships roared overhead, spilling armored troops into the canyon. It was chaos all over again, screaming metal, plasma fire, and smoke that turned the sun red. Runt launched himself into the fray like a meteor. The first alien went down before it could even scream. Theo followed, firing in short bursts, covering the creature's flanks. For every alien that advanced, 2 fell back in panic. Carter's voice echoed through comms. "Signal's ready." "Just hold the line," Theo shouted back. "How long?" "Long enough?" The fight blurred into noise. Bolts, screams, claws, fire. Theo didn't know how long he'd been fighting until his rifle overheated. He looked around and saw Runt cornered by 3 Kithar hunters. One fired a plasma bolt that hit the ground beside him, throwing dust and blood into the air. Theo screamed. "No!" Something broke inside him. He grabbed a fallen alien's weapon and fired until the barrel melted. Runt got up again, burned, limping, but alive. And together they pushed through the wreckage toward the uplink tower. Carter saw them and hit the final sequence on the console. "Transmit now!" A single coded beam shot upward, piercing the cloud layer. In orbit, the Kithar cannon's systems flickered. Their targeting arrays glitched for 2 seconds. It was enough. The uplink's backup payload detonated, a massive EMP burst that fried every orbital circuit within range. The cannon fell silent. Its last hum died like a fading heartbeat. Below, the alien ships wobbled, losing control. Some fell out of the sky, burning through the atmosphere like falling stars. Carter slumped beside the console, breathing hard. "We did it?" Theo looked around at the destruction, then down at Runt. The creature's chest was rising and falling slowly. His fur was scorched, one eye swollen shut. Theo held him tight. "We're going home," he whispered. Runt's head twitched, his breathing steadied, and he made that same low growl, the one that always meant not yet. When the human rescue fleet arrived 2 days later, they found the battlefield silent. The Kithar had withdrawn, their fleet retreating beyond sensor range. Only one small beacon blinked among the ruins, an emergency signal carrying a single message. "Never threaten a human's pet." The video footage from Delta 9 spread faster than any official report. Across the colonies, people spoke the same phrase in quiet admiration and disbelief. And somewhere far away, in a dark room aboard the Kithar flagship, General Vrith stared at the shattered recording of the last transmission. The image of a child standing beside a blood-stained creature played on a loop. He whispered to himself. The universe learned too late. Weeks passed before Delta 9 breathed again. The skies that once burned with plasma now glowed faint blue, full of dust and quiet. The planet was scarred but alive, and somehow so were they. Human rescue ships landed across the ruins, collecting survivors, recording everything for the fleet archives. The stories they gathered didn't sound like battle reports. They sounded like myths. A child, a pet, a storm. No one who hadn't been there truly believed it. Theo sat on a small hill overlooking the broken valley, his legs wrapped in a blanket. Runt lay beside him, patched up by medics who couldn't believe he was still breathing. Half his fur was gone, replaced by fresh bandages and quiet defiance. Carter joined them, leaning on a metal crutch. She'd refused every medal and every speech. "You two," she said softly, "have managed to terrify an empire." Theo gave a tired smile. "He just protected me." Carter looked out toward the distant horizon. "That's the thing about humans. When we protect something, the rest of the galaxy calls it war." Behind them, the fleet engineers were clearing what was left of the Kithar wreckage. Every surviving drone and armor plate was sent for study. The military wanted to understand what had happened, how an animal barely larger than a bag could dismantle advanced alien soldiers. They'd never understand it. Not really, because it wasn't about strength or tactics or science. It was something smaller and far more dangerous, a human heart that refused to let go. Far above, the Kithar Empire reeled from humiliation. Whole sectors were in chaos. Soldiers whispered about the beast of Earth, a creature that fought beside a child and destroyed an army. Their leaders called it an anomaly. The veterans called it a warning. General Vrith was alive, but barely. The explosion had scarred his face and stripped away his armor's honor markings. He stood before his empire's council in silence as they demanded answers. He said only one thing: never provoke a human's loyalty. You will not survive it. Back on Delta 9, the rebuilding began. The colony was renamed Fort Honey, half as a joke, half as reverence. Every ship that landed there carried small emblems of black and white stripes, a quiet salute to the creature that had reminded the stars who humans were. Theo grew up in the new settlement. He studied engineering, then command. He and Runt were inseparable. Wherever he went, the honey badger followed. Slower now, but still proud, still dangerous. One evening, as the sun set behind the rebuilt towers, Carter visited them. Her uniform was crisp again, her eyes softer. She knelt beside Runt, scratching behind his ear. "You realize, kid, they made statues of him on Mars?" Theo laughed. He'd probably attack them if he saw them. Runt snorted as if agreeing. Carter looked toward the stars. "You know, the universe is watching Earth differently now. The Kithar are retreating. Other species are thinking twice before sending their fleets. You and your friend changed how they see us." Theo grew quiet. "I didn't mean to." Carter smiled. "That's what makes it worse for them. Above them, streaks of light cut across the night sky. Human ships patrolling the stars, carrying the message of Delta 9 wherever they went. Don't underestimate humanity. Don't touch what they love. Don't forget the lesson of the honey badger." As darkness settled, Theo lay back beside Runt. The creature's breathing was steady now, peaceful. Theo whispered, "You did good, buddy." "Real good?" Runt made a low sound, not quite a growl, not quite a purr, just the quiet hum of something content for the first time in its life. And somewhere in the endless dark between worlds, fleets whispered the story to each other, of a child, a creature, and a rule the universe would never again ignore: never threaten a human's pet.